Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Elliot Olson. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am the Trans, Intersex, and Non-Binary Program Officer at the New Haven Pride Center. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge the land on which we are hosting this event. The New Haven Pride Center operates and was founded on the traditional lands of the Mohegan, Mashantucket Pequot, Eastern Pequot, Schaghticoke, Golden Hill Pawcatuck, Niantic, and Quinnipiac peoples. Please take a moment, acknowledge the land, and honor the native peoples whose lands you occupy and the history of the place you are in. You can learn more about native lands in the link you see below, native-land.ca. Welcome to New Haven Pride Center's continuing programming during Trans Week of Awareness. We're bringing you events, art exhibits, panels, and all of this is leading up to Saturday, November 20th, which is TDOR, Trans Day of Remembrance, where we'll be holding a vigil and a speak out at 3 p.m. on the New Haven Green. To see the full schedule, go to newhavenpridecenter.org and you will see our calendar on the left-hand side. And you can also look at all of our panelists' bios, all the events that are happening, all of that good stuff. Speaking of panelists, we have some amazing panelists today where we will be talking about the experiences of BIPOC trans women. This is an incredibly important topic, especially during TDOR. Transgender Day of Remembrance was founded in 1999 by Gwendolyn Ann Smith, who is a transgender woman, and it was to memorialize the murder of Rita Hester in Alton, Massachusetts. Murders of trans people in the U.S. have doubled since the last year. Some are calling this the deadliest year for trans people. And with that in mind, people of color, specifically trans women of color, make up 89% of the 53 people murdered so far in Connecticut. As trans women have gained prominence both within our community and on the broader national stage, narratives are dominated by white trans experiences. This leaves many BIPOC trans women to live in the shadows and continue to be significantly underrepresented in the queer movement in large, despite being disproportionately affected by violence and discrimination. That doesn't seem right. This panel will feature a group of BIPOC trans women who refuse to allow this narrative to continue. So let's dive into the conversation. I'm excited to introduce our panelist and moderator. First off, we have Karleigh Webb. Hey, Karleigh.
Elliot, good afternoon.
So just, letting our audience know a little bit about you. I know you're in your 28th year as a journalist, and you're currently working as a contributor and a writer for LGBTQ sports site Outsports. You also host Instagram Lives and the Trans Sporter Room podcast, also powered by Outsports. You interview fancy key individuals around the world. You're not afraid of the microphone whatsoever. In that regard, you also are a staff operator at Trans Lifeline, one of North America's only 24-hour crisis lines staffed by and for trans people. Thank you so much for joining. I am so proud to call you my friend, and also to have you join this conversation.
And I am proud to call you my comrade as well as an organizer for the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And I'm not just here not just as a moderator, I'm a proud member of the New Haven Pride Center. Your Pride Center, my Pride Center, our Pride Center. And just a reminder, everybody, especially in this Trans Awareness Week, this type of programming is crucial. It's something that our Pride Center has made a commitment to excellence, a commitment to liberation, and a commitment to resistance. And it's earned your support. So please, especially in this week, kick a little back to the New Haven Pride Center, because they kicked a lot back, especially during this pandemic.
We're trying. Next up, we have Jaime Sabatino. Hi, I'm so glad to have you.
Hello.
Just to let the audience know a little bit about you, working class, Afro, Indigenous, multiracial, lesbian, trans woman. You've lived in Connecticut your whole life. I know you're involved in anti-racist, anti-war, and police accountability activism for like a decade or more. I know you speak openly about surviving homelessness, abuse, and systematic transphobia in our state. You're also a vocal advocate for trans workers' rights, and speak out against workplace discrimination, especially bringing in your own experiences. Thank you so much for being on the panel today.
Of course.
Next up, Jessica Leyba. Hey, Jess.
Hello.
Thanks so much for joining us. Trans and bisexual. Oh, it's good to have you. So yeah, just letting everybody know a little bit about you. Trans and bi, Chicana service worker and socialist activist and organizer from Albuquerque, New Mexico. I know you've taken leadership on a broad range of initiatives, around COVID-19 vaccination access, unemployment advocacy, direct service resource navigation, anti-war and anti-racist organizing, topping it all off, LGBTQ plus rights organizing. I know that you also are a hobbyist and computer programmer, and a game developer, and you do creative coding and are interested in like the concept of software as art and creative expression, which I'm super interested about as well, but is totally off topic for today. So we also have Ravyn Moulton, who will be joining us later on. Just to say a few words, Ravyn is an advocate for trans individuals in Connecticut and a case management specialist, victim and trauma care services developer, a community organizer, a natural hair enthusiast. Her work in healthcare and her lived experience have empowered her to help trans people facing homelessness, domestic and intimate partner violence, and systematic racist abuse. I will get out of here. Thank you all so much for joining the center for this conversation. I will hand it off to our moderator, Karleigh. Again, thank you all so much.
Thank you, Elliot.
Quick question. Is anybody else having a hard time hearing?
No, I can hear you just fine. And thank you, Elliot.
Okay, I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing.
And thank you, Patrick Dunn. I'll project a little bit. Jamie, can you hear me now?
Not really, but let's continue. I'll hold my phone close to me.
Okay, now. Well, everyone, as Elliot said, good afternoon. And what we're talking about here, we're say our names, but not only just say our names, fight with us. And if you have a question, want to share a thought, comment from wherever you're watching, give a comment. We're going to try and answer it, but I'm going to start right off with what's on my mind. As a trans woman of color in this society right now, and Jamie, I want to start with you with this one because you've lived this question. Right now, what is your greatest fear?
Honestly, I'm pretty scared that I'm gonna die because I've been having a hard time with holding jobs, just having a job, getting mental health care, feeling safe in my community, just because people are uneducated and bigoted towards trans women, especially trans women of color.
Jessica, adding in, what about you right now as a trans woman of color in our society, where we are? What is your greatest fear?
I am probably most afraid of, like, honestly, like fascism and the rise of like just extreme violent bigotry against people like me as and oppressed people in general. That's the thing that I'm afraid of.
With that in mind, I want you to complete this next sentence. Trans awareness is, and Jessica, you start off with that. Trans awareness is, and fill in the blank.
Higher now than it's been, but also there's complexity to that because at the one has more acceptance of trans people probably, but then also like you have still like it's nowhere near, and then like with that awareness you have like more than ever there's like an organized like right-wing attack on trans people, in particular the most vulnerable and oppressed trans people, which tend to be trans people who are indigenous people of color.
Jaime, what about you? Fill in the blank. Trans awareness is.
It's an uphill battle because a lot of people are stuck in their own thinking. They don't have open minds to want to learn about trans people, you know? So it's just about being educated.
I mean, one thing I do want to touch on, Jessica, what you're talking about, this hard turn to the right that especially that really a lot of industrial societies have been taking in these last 3 or 4 years. Even those who call even countries that call themselves Western industrial societies have. When you're seeing this right turn, the legislation that you're seeing here in this country, the rampant transphobia that you're seeing in places like the UK, the out and out authoritarian anti-trans stance of, say, the Viktor Orban regime in Hungary. What's your gut reaction when you're seeing what seems to be a wave and trans people seem to be the prime target for a lot of this wave?
My gut reaction is this is something that we need to talk about more and that needs to be known more, is that there's an actual like organized, it's not just right out of nowhere. There's an actual organized like right-wing, honestly fascist attack on the existence of trans people right now, and it's like this is the deadliest year ever for trans people. So like while there's been like increases in rights and stuff like that, and more people like know the trans struggle and stuff, like it's still not. We need to have solidarity and we need to build a movement. Is what we need to do. A movement to resist these honestly fascist attacks on transgender people.
Jaime, I want you to write a statement for me based on what Jessica's talking about as far as building a movement. Rate this statement from scale of 1 to 10. 1, no way in hell. 10, facts AF. Trans women of color and white trans women can find solidarity.
I'd say about a 9.
Wow, a 9. Okay, and because honestly, I rate that about a 3.5. But
Why do you
why a
believe
9?
that? Well, I think that there's a lot of people who want to try, but they just don't know how to. I feel like we are separate in a lot of ways, and we just have to reach out and communicate more. like there has to be an effort between trans women of color as well from trans women that are white, as well as allies. There has to be a conversation.
Well, Jaime, talk about that a little bit. To you, what does that conversation look like?
Well, I think this panel is a good place to start. I think like the Pride Center is a good idea. I think going to areas where queer people hang out, and we have to actually see ourselves as a community. Like I know a lot of queer men don't see trans women as women. A lot of white queer men don't view people of color as part of the community if they're like disabled or whatever. Like it just has to be solidarity, you know. It has to be what's the word I'm looking for? We just have to be united, I guess.
Well, see, I can run with that. In fact, I'll bump mine up based on what you're saying to maybe a 4.5. But here's why I see that. And there's a question that coming back in. I'm seeing it in a lot of ways because one thing as part of what I do for Outsports is I've covered a lot of the anti-trans legislation that's gone down. A lot of it centering around trans youth being discriminated against at their school in terms of being able to play for a sports team at their school. I've covered hundreds of hours of hearings, depositions, debates on this. And the one common thread that I've seen is that our national media really fell asleep at the switch when you have two of the largest states in the United States pass these laws, one of whom was signed on the first day of Pride. The governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, presidential candidate in 2024, prospective presidential hopeful, basically flipped the bird to the entire LGBTQ community, in my view, by signing that bill on the first day of Pride. And I didn't see the mainstream media really touch it. I saw it took the Biden administration 2 months after Texas passed their ridiculous law, in which they had to do some backroom maneuvering to do it before they even spoke out on it. That's why I say it's a 4.5. And that leads to a question that's been on my mind. We've heard a lot about trans lives matter and Black trans lives matter. In your view, and this is to both of you, why has or hasn't the sentiment been followed by concrete action?
For outreach towards Black Lives Matter as well as Black Trans Lives Matter?
I'm also talking about in terms of things getting done, i.e. legislation getting passed, initiatives getting done, initiatives getting done. Your view, why has or hasn't that sentiment been followed by some actions? In short, if you've seen the actions, where are you seeing it? If they haven't, where have we fallen short?
I think that there's demands, and there's demands that come out of the community, but there's not as much as there should be. There isn't like a huge movement making it happen, because it's not going to happen through it's never how it works, where like you ask for something and it comes. It's more that like we have to make it happen, and that's how it's always been, like throughout the entire history of the movement and throughout all like progressive and revolutionary social movements. Like to happen, we have to get in the streets, we have to organize, we have to force it to happen, because it won't happen on its own. It won't happen. Change will not come up.
I think there has to be some intersectionality. I feel like trans women, I think there's only 1% of trans women in America. Is that a right statistic?
Well, overall, we're looking at transgender people in this country about 1.51 million right now.
Okay.
Well,
more people are coming out every day. So there's definitely a lot more visibility, but I feel like when it comes to trans women of color organizing with Black Lives Matter, there has to be intersectionality. You know, there's so few of us that our voices have to be magnified. What we're saying and our experiences have to be taken under consideration. And I feel that we need to take to the streets, and we need to be more vocal. We need to broadcast just our experiences, what we're angry about as people of color, as trans women. You know, and it's a collective thing. It's a collective effort.
Jaime, what are you angry about?
There's a lot of stuff. I'm angry about bigotry. I'm angry about TERFs. I'm angry about gate guards. I'm angry that people don't want to hire me because they don't see me as a woman. I'm mad when people don't use my pronouns. They use my dead name. They don't use the name Jamie. I'm mad that when I was homeless, there were women in the homeless shelter who were bothered by my genitalia. Obviously, I was wearing pants, but they could see that I wasn't born woman, and they just weren't in the position to want to be educated. They were just kind of bothered by my existence, you know? So I'm angry that it feels like my existence is not wanted.
Jessica, how about you? What are you angry about?
I'm angry that this society is as it is. I'm angry that I mean I'm angry that I will get and have been accosted, like just from my like just walking to my car in the parking lot of like the grocery store and things. I'm angry that we still live in a society that is this way and like is in almost in at least it's in at risk of even regressing on these kinds of things. Like I'm angry that we live in a society. I'm honestly I'm angry that we live in a capitalist society.
Oh, wait a minute.
Increasingly like teetering on the edge of destruction. So like in every way, with climate change, the threat of nuclear war, and that's just on top of being trans, being Chicana, like all of this. That's what I'm angry about.
I'm angry about all the above. And Jessica, I like the fact that you brought a little hammer and sickle up in here today. Because we need to talk about the system. In fact, that is a question. I'm just going to put it out there. In fact, I'll make it rate the statement. 1, no way in hell. 10, facts AF. Trans people can't trust this system as currently constituted.
That's a 10.
That's it. That gets a 20 for me. I'll put it out there. An example of this. The Connecticut LGBTQ community survey just came out, and everybody, by the way, hey, Patrick, when you get a chance, put up the link for that survey because that's something people need to read. There was a stat on there that was telling of the transgender people who responded. Now, these are transgender people in the state of Connecticut, mind you. These are trans people who live in Connecticut. 32% have been refused housing services at some point just for strictly because of who they are.
Yeah.
That's 1 in 3. I'm angry about that. And I haven't seen I need move and state legislature. I need movement on that. I mean, I need, that's where in many ways, that's where my solidarity ratings across the board come from. They are about a 3 to 4 at best. I can't give intergroup solidarity with trans people a 5 yet. I can't broach that yet. And for that reason, because there seems to be a little bit of movement. I mean, it's just like how we all feel about Pride Month. There seems to be a little bit of movement. People talk about it. And then on July 1st, nobody's talking about it no more.
Exactly.
And yes, check out the LGBTQ plus needs assessment survey. NewHavenPrideCenter.org/LGBTQ needs assessment. Read this. I'm serious. I mean, this gives you the picture of how things are. And also another thing, the National Center for Transgender Equality is planning a 2022 nationwide transgender survey. Fill it out. When it drops, make your voice known. Let's get a true picture of the things we need. And while we're at it, I want to talk about something that we need. Because to me, housing's always been an issue. And I've been a person who's dealt with transphobic people in a housing structure, in a rental housing session before. It sucks. And it's ridiculous. That 32% number, that's horrible. I'm one of that. I'll call it out. I'm one of that 32%. But another place is the labyrinth that we've all got to deal with. It's healthcare. What makes it harder in your view for trans women of color, for BIPOC trans women, when we're trying to negotiate healthcare? Man, Jaime, you said the word gate guarding.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there's a lot of, well, as you were saying before, there's a lot of white women who don't view trans people of color as women, or they just don't value our lives. They don't take our cries seriously. There's a lot of hospitals, you know, they dead name us. They don't recognize us as women. So I feel like there needs to be more trans women of color in healthcare. There needs to be more trans people just having.
Jessica, what about you? What are your thoughts on this one here?
I think that just across the board, like all oppressed people have, like, throughout our society, like people have like reactionary and racist and bigoted ideas about anyone who is like nationally oppressed. So people of color, like that just like that permeates everything, including like the healthcare system, which like it's been like proven that for instance, like doctors tend to assume because of racist bigotry that, for instance, Black people feel less pain, and like that's like that. Just things like that are like endemic, and so like it just permeates every aspect of society. Like racism comes out of the necessities of like imperialist, like the superstructure of capitalism again, which means that like it's going to permeate every aspect in our present society.
Jessica, you bringing that up brought back something that happened to me before as well. I fired a doctor because I overheard him say, "We know Black people really don't feel pain."
Wow.
And that was a
Talk
doctor
about
in
dehumanizing.
Connecticut. Yeah. Thankfully,
Yeah.
they left the state, and for as far as I know, they're practicing elsewhere. But to hear
Mhm.
that, I'm in one room. I overheard him say it. I walked out of that room, confronted him, and said, "We don't feel pain. Feel this. I'm out of here. You're fired." And
Yeah.
one thing, Jessica, you've worked with issues surrounding COVID-19 in a good deal of organizing, good deal of activism, and a good deal of your activism as of late. How has the pandemic affected you, and how has it changed the focus of your organizing? And did it change your view of being trans? Did it change your view of the community?
I'm sorry, my audio keeps cutting out a little bit. But if um, I would say that, I mean, honestly, like, um, I know numerous people who have passed away in the pandemic, like, and just, I mean, the pandemic is just like accentuates and amplifies like every other problem in society. So like, the people least like the people most likely to die of COVID to be the people who are already the most oppressed in society, which tends to be working class people of color. of transgender people among them. And so like just like all the oppressions and all the problems of society are just amplified during the pandemic, and it has resulted in just, I don't know, it's not been good. And while like there's overwhelming like poverty and homelessness and increasing poverty and homelessness as I don't know, there's just lots of bad.
Jessica, one thing I know about you is you get in the streets and you get after it. You engage in analysis that's not the mainstream. You're definitely not you're definitely not a vote blue type, neither am I.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on those within the trans community who say, Jessica, it's you radical trans activists who ruin it for the rest of us? Greater awareness is more important. Your activism is just breeding resentment. What are your thoughts on
The thing
that
is,
view that comes from trans people?
the thing is that always like since like the very beginning, like there's always like the movement started out like for like like back to Stonewall, and like started out radical and revolutionary, and then there's always like a more liberal side to that, which is like, like, oh well, we just need to be respectable, we don't need to go too far, and like this has never been true. That's never been the case. It's always been about like the path, like literally right, and every like gain that trans people have had in this country and in every country has been through struggle and like militant struggle, like back to Stonewall in the 60s and stuff. Like it was like right from the beginning, it was a revolutionary struggle. Like you think about like Starr and Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Webb. It's not like um, it's not like this is new. This is like literally where our movement from revolutionary struggle in the streets, and it that's where we've won every single thing that we've ever won, and that's where we will really finally like win actual liberation is through struggle. And so abandoning like people calling to struggle or to weaken the struggle or to try to be respectable and try to just absorb ourselves into patriarchal society, that's not acceptable, and that will also never bring us liberation or never bring us gains.
Well, I'd like to ask those people one question. When you talk about we just got to be respectable, what does that mean? What are we saying? I've heard that phrase most of my life. Respectable to some people means if you just act a little white, you'll be all right.
Yeah.
I have a problem with this. I mean, I can't rock with that. I'll never rock with that. And that's one thing. Why is it that so much that the larger, in your mind, because this is something I believe about the larger queer community in many cases. A lot of people talk about supporting trans women of color, but they don't walk the walk. In your mind, what's holding our larger queer community and especially our white queer community and our white trans community from actually walking that walk, from actually turning words into actions, into deeds?
I think there's a lack of like the lack of solidarity comes from honestly it comes from um like it's like the way the system works is that some people more oppressed than others or have greater oppression thrust on them, and other people less, but still also, and that helps split people up. Like if all trans people were uniformly oppressed, then it would be easier for trans people to unite together and put an end to it. But it's like a divide and conquer kind of thing of the system. So like that's like it's like an intrinsic thing, like, and a barrier to solidarity is like the idea that for more, like, I guess the term people would use is like more privileged people in society, it's more difficult for them to have solidarity with more people in society because society affords them relatively greater privileges. And so it's just a way that society brings solidarity between oppressed people, because that's the thing that will ultimately have us win and like get rid of all of this like oppression and like have actual liberation for trans people is solidarity between all trans people and between cis and trans people, between everybody, all oppressed people. When we get together.
Can I add to that?
No, go on in. Jamie, just jump on in.
Well, I feel that a lot of trans women that are white, who aren't trans women of color, their experience is different because they are white passing. So they have a little bit more privilege. They have to know that racism has always been entrenched in American culture, you know, just capitalism in general. So they need to know more about our experience. They need to know more about our culture. They have to reach out.
Now, for the both of you, in that in mind, what can this solidarity look like? Where does it start? How does it grow? How does it build? For example, if you could pick if let's say a group of people are hearing this and they come up to you, go, Jamie, Jessica, look, we heard this, but where do we begin? What would you tell them?
I think, like, what does solidarity look like? What will solidarity look like? Like, solidarity, like, exists already. It's just, like, it's not permeating, like, the movement and all of society. Like, but it'll, like, anytime you see it in glimpses, like, it's literally the most powerful thing that we have. Like, solidarity is the most powerful thing that us people have. Like, generally, because it's when oppressed people link together that we can actually change things. And so what it looks like is people helping each other. It looks like people from one group standing up for people from another group. It looks like people like action in action, like actually physically and actually materially working for each other's benefit, because and like it's out of that things will be changed. And like you'll know what solidarity is when you see it. It's not subtle.
One thing
I believe.
No, go ahead, Jamie. Go.
Yeah, I believe solidarity is organizing. I believe it's taking to the streets. I believe it's reaching out to trans women with healthcare problems, mental health care problems, physical problems. I believe it's us organizing, building a community for and by trans women, like having a place where trans women can go so you don't have to go to a men's shelter or a women's shelter, you know, and deal with bigotry there. We need to have places that are for trans people by trans people.
See, I can run with that. Another thing, however, is one thing we do have in many ways in our LGBTQ communities, we've built spaces. We've built, there's spaces that are there. But what would you want to tell? In fact, a person who runs one of those spaces is running things behind the scenes on this panel right now. So you've got the ear of one of them. What would you want to tell a local pride center or a space to start including in their programming, events, initiatives to buttress and lift up trans women of color? What would you tell them? And even like, let's say a Patrick Dunn comes to you and says, hey, we need some, hey, I want to do some different programming, not sure where to start. What would you tell him? I know one thing out of the gate I would tell him is we need greater outreach. We need greater outreach to Black and brown trans women of color, especially, but also Black and brown communities, be they trans or be they cis, who are in our rainbow family together. We need further outreach, but especially pointed outreach within trans women of color. It's not just a matter of saying, come as you are. You got to go to where they are, and they got to see your faces. That's the one thing I would tell anyone. You got to go where they are, see their faces, and also be prepared to have your edges snatched a little bit. Be prepared to have your coat pulled to things. Be prepared to have the hard conversations. Be prepared to be told where you've been. Take a look. You may have to take a little bit of a butt chewing, but get the knowledge.
Well,
I agree with all of that. Because my audio keeps cutting out a little bit, so it can sometimes be hard for me to get questions.
But no, I'm just looking at if like the head of these spaces came to you and said, "Hey, what would you want to tell them about what some needs are that are not being filled in terms of programming, initiatives, events to lift trans women of color up?"
I mean, like this sort of event, like actually having trans women of color speak, like that's important. I think that's a start. Like actually being able to speak, because like that's something that just in general, like it seems rare, like to actually have any sort of platform in which to talk about these sorts of things, like, and they're things that need to be talked about. So like, I mean, like that's, I think, like step one is actually listen to trans women of color, because we have things to say.
I think it's important to meet trans women of color at their struggle. There's a lot of problems with homelessness, obviously. There's trans women who don't have clothing, who can't afford rent, who can't find a job, who don't have housing, who just don't have the resources. So there needs to be some type of outreach being done. There needs to be questions asked.
No, I agree with that. We need to be asking the critical questions. That's part of, and that's something that can't just stop at this week. It's got to go on past this week. I mean, revolution is not one big thing. It's small things being done consistently every day. But one thing for all of us, one thing that all three of us in this conversation have in common is that, Jessica, I know you get out there and organize. You're in the streets. Jaime, we've been in the streets together.
Yeah, definitely.
We've been out there on those front lines and those marches together. And we know how exhausting it is and how difficult it is when you hear the phrase, sing it if you know it, 2021 is the deadliest year on record for trans people. And it seems like you don't even need a year anymore. You just need a blank saying add a year. And it seems like it's getting worse and worse and worse. Where do you, amid all this trans struggle, where do you find trans joy? And or where do you find the means to what mechanisms do you employ to cope and keep yourself upright?
I know that I find like I enjoy in my friends and my comrades when I actually have support, when I have support from people, and like it's something that has been I don't know, it's difficult to say, but like trans joy can be difficult to find and like very fleeting in our world. But like I find it when I'm supported by people and when I'm surrounded by people who I mean, I keep bringing it back to this same topic, but who have solidarity with me.
Well, I feel like something that's helped me get through just COVID is just people being there for me, you know. people listening to my struggle, me listening to their struggle, you know. My therapist has helped me, my doctors, my transition, you know, that's given me joy. Just becoming more comfortable with myself and becoming who I am. It's really difficult in this world, though, you know, there's a lot of ignorance, there's a lot of bigotry. Um, it's really just about, you know, knowing who you are and having conversations with people and just doing outreach, finding out what other people's struggles are.
Just a reminder to all those in the audience, our time, I mean, we're getting near closer to the end of the hour. If there's anything you want to say or any questions you want to ask of the panel, put them in there. Put them in there and we'll get to as many of them as they can. And I mean, that's another thing I want to follow up with, Jaime, with you. How rough has it been to like continue, like you have these means to cope, but give me a picture for those who may not know, because you've lived a lot of I mean, you especially, I know this from firsthand, you've lived a lot of this hard knock experience of being trans right now in this time. What keeps you going, and also what keeps you hopeful? Because you still get, even with all the things you've been through, when the community is called, you've answered, you organize, you've been out front. What keeps you moving, even with the difficulties you've pushed through?
I guess I'm just hard-headed. I try not to let it beat me, you know. I try to continue to learn about other people's struggles. I try to learn as much as possible, you know. Keep going, keep transforming, keep evolving. I don't know. It's just I try not to let it get me down.
No, don't run with that. Keep there, but I'll say this for myself: it gets hard. It gets hard when you wake up in the morning, you log on, you check out a news source, and there's another one, and there's another one, and there's another one, or when you're logging in to see a hearing on yet more anti-trans bills, and you're hearing a little 9-year-old trans kid is speaking to their legislature saying, just let me go to school, let me play ball, just let me live, and let me beg. That it wears on you. I mean, I mean, one of my coping mechanisms is some of them video games. So Jessica, keep building more stuff. I'll beta test. I'll find where the bugs are.
That would be great.
But that's one thing, since we're getting near the back end of it. What is if there is one thing you'd want to point out? Let's say you had one thing you want to point out to those, especially within the family. I want to have a little community self-defense right now among our rainbow family. What's the one thing that those of us who may not be who are not trans don't quite get about the struggles of those of us who are?
Well, what queer people used to experience, trans people are still experiencing. The world's been a little bit more accepting of like gay men, lesbians, but trans people were on the front line, you know, and it was trans women of color who were fighting for the rights of queer people. We need that solidarity right back, you know. We need to see more allies. We need to see allies that are straight. We need to see allies that are cis. We need to see allies that are gay. We need to see allies that are lesbians. We just need more solidarity.
Jessica, how about you? What's that one thing you think they're missing?
I mean, my audio is cutting out a little bit, so I didn't get 100% about the question, but like, was it for
no, the question was
of color?
What is the rest of our queer family, our rainbow family? What's one thing that they are missing about what trans people go through? And in fact,
that like they're like what Jaime said, they're missing that like a lot of the sorts of struggles that been ultimately won by the movement, or like made into less a thing by the movement are things still and extremely like right now extremely relevant like for trans people like we're fighting to just exist at all. Something that you should understand is that we're fighting to be allowed to exist at all because there's people basically trying to legislate us out of existence right now, as well as like literally kill us. Because like people should understand that that's literally how bad it is that it's like literally a question of existence or not. Like varsity actually trying to stop us from existing. And
Now,
that's something that people should understand.
There was a question that came in from those out there watching this, and the question was, what can I as a white cis man do to be a better ally to BIPOC trans women? And that goes hand in hand with the one thing I think queer people are missing is that I think that the answer to that to me goes hand in hand with what a lot of our rainbow community is missing is that the trans liberation fight is your fight too. Because what's hitting us at one level first, what's hitting the reason why they're hitting us is to do a boomerang action back towards all the gains that we've made. And the people who are pushing this legislation especially are not denying it. You can go to all their websites and read their position papers. They're opening saying, if we can separate the T from the rest of y'all and attack them and get you to help us attack them, we can get rid of the T and then we're going to boomerang back and go after marriage equality and go after employment rights and go after reproductive rights and we're going to roll back all that. It's a systemic plan and they own up to it. Now, to that questioner, I want you all to add in the first thing you can do to be a better ally is focus less on that, focus less on the label ally and focus more on the work that needs to be done, especially among other white cis men like yourself. Understand that you have had this high level of privilege, but that high level privilege is coming at the expense of a lot of other things. You've got to be prepared to put that privilege down and it'll lift everyone else up. And again, including yourself. A society is only as strong as its weakest link. And right now, my people and I, we're dying out here. We're dying out here. And we need people in it. Focus less on the label, focus more on the work.
So, obviously recognize women as women, using our names, using our pronouns, fighting for healthcare, fighting for houses, taking to the streets. And it's just a matter of visibility, because our voices are being silenced. So, for example, a cis man, they take what you're saying under consideration. You can help us to get what we need, housing, healthcare rights.
Got a question on the floor, actually from NPR's Alios. But before that, go ahead, Jessica. What did you have to add?
I was just saying, basically, reiterating what people said that, actually, a lot of people will put a lot of stock in a lot of thing into the word ally and stuff, and honestly, we need people in the struggle more than we need someone to you should actually try to get involved and actually be in struggle some way, in a material way, not just words, because that's something that happened just in general in our society. I've noticed is that oftentimes the words and the terminology and stuff is elevated over actual material change. And the thing is, that's what we actually need, is we need actual material change. And there's numerous ways to get involved in things. You could to organize, to donate, to literally actually be involved in the struggle. And that more than anything is what people need. And it's good that it's a good thing when you speak up and when you are actually organizing in solidarity with oppressed people. And yeah, like that's what we need just across the board, is people in the struggle fighting for each other.
Also, one last question that came in from the panel. In fact, it came from Connecticut Public Radio's Ali Olsinski. What is the work that individuals can do in themselves to start helping make the world safer for BIPOC, trans, and queer folk across the board? Well, to me, the first thing is investigate your biases, learn about them, grow above them. That's the first thing. Investigate the things you've been programmed with a critical eye. Really look at them. Really focus in on them. That, I think that to me is where it starts.
That's so perfect. That makes perfect sense. Like, that's honestly something that like is at the very beginning of like before you, like actually, like everyone, literally everyone in our society is inoculated with like reactionary consciousness, reactionary views about trans people, about like about all oppressed people, and like that's just the way our oppressive society works. And so like you have to actually actively these things that society has put into your head. You have to actually actively unlearn them. So it's and that's before and like it's not like a one-step process. It's like going to be over and over again for a period of time. You're always going to be unlearning things that society has taught you that are actually nonsense, that are harmful, in fact.
Yeah, see, that's that one thing of that word. That's the word I'm thinking of a lot throughout this entire conversation is reactionary. And it's ugly reactionaryism, to say the least, and on the part especially of these people who would go after kids. And that's one thing, just real quick. What is it like? Because we're all adults in this room, and there's a panel of young trans people and their experiences coming later this week. And I encourage many people, especially, go to it. I will be there. A person who I consider a personal hero of mine is a part of one of those is a part of that panel. When they go after kids, especially, what goes through your head? What goes through your heart when you see, especially, that they're trying to pass laws to discriminate against young children just because they are trans children?
It's heartbreaking, you know.
I think of how
these are just kids who are trying. Go ahead, Jess.
Oops.
Go ahead, Jess. You can go.
Oh, so sorry. I thought you froze or something. I don't mean to interrupt. I think we just both talked at the same time. Are you finished?
Yeah, go ahead. You can go.
I'll just say that it's abominable, and it shows the level of hatred that people have for trans people, that they're like openly spend their time and effort in actively working and organizing to the effect of hurting transgender children. Like actually, like that shows how extensive and how deep the hatred and the evil goes, is that like people actually spend like people, there's people working hard right now, like as we speak, to harm transgender children, and they're working really hard at it. And so like we have to know that, and we have to think about that, and we have to meet them. Like we have to fight these people. We have to do everything we can to fight and defeat these people, because like we've seen like Like we've seen like in Hungary and Britain, we've seen like things go really far. Also, like just it's like we have to fight. That's what we have to do.
Just to give you a litany
For me,
on
it's
how
heartbreaking.
it is.
Sorry.
No,
Yeah,
I'm
for
just
me,
saying.
it's
Just
heartbreaking. We're all talking at once. Go ahead, Carla.
no. Just quickly, just to give a litany on how far that's gone. 38 states have attempted discriminatory actions that directly affect transgender youth, either proposed or passed. 10 states have passed it in the form of banning transgender youth from being a part of interscholastic athletic teams in their schools. 10 states have passed those. 2 other states, Mississippi and Tennessee, have passed full bans on affirming care for transgender youth, to where parents could be cited under the state's child abuse laws, and healthcare professionals can be cited and imprisoned for rendering affirming healthcare onto transgender youth.
Yeah, I heard
With
about that
another
recently. Yeah.
17
Wow.
with another 17 states that are also looking to pass said laws. One of those states that passed it, Mississippi, is now trying to draw. There are legislators in Mississippi trying to draft law to ban affirming care for transgender people for anyone.
Yeah.
But you were saying, Jamie, it's heartbreaking. It is.
Yeah, it's really heartbreaking, and I think it's important to fight these legislations. Like, know who's passing these bills, knowing what we could do to stop them. You know, being vocal, talking to our alders, to our mayors, taking to the streets. You know, maybe even putting up flyers about things that are happening in our communities, like just flyering, marching. There's plenty of things.
Well, one thing here in Connecticut, Jamie, something that I've heard a lot of discussion about, is that a certain K Street hit squad has returned to our state, putting up billboards about discriminating against transgender youth. And this was the same group which demeaned 2 transgender kids in our state, who, by the way, were trans and are Black. Yes.
Which group
Alliance
is this?
Defending Freedom. Alliance Defending Freedom. We see what you do. We see what you do. Just hashtag just saying. But no, it is heartbreaking, and I've seen, like I said, I've seen these panels, and if anybody is doubting what I'm telling you, see me afterwards. I'll send you what some of these people said. I heard a man, to the face of a woman who is raising a transgender child, say, "The thought of transgender children makes me sick to my stomach, and any parent that affirms their child, they're a child abuser to me." And if you don't believe me if you think I'm BSing you, I'll put the video up all over my social media. This happened, people.
I'm not familiar with that group, but it just goes to show the length that these people they'll go. You know, even just with racism in America, just how they treated Black children, slaves. You know, slave owners would sleep with Black women. They would have children that were mixed race. You know, and they would abandon them. They would just be very harmful to these people, and it's just ridiculous. You know, and just what we're seeing in America against trans children, trans people, it's the exact same thing.
Well, one thing, we are way past our time here.
5 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, for all of you. And Jessica, I want to start with you first. What is the one thing that you want people to think about and act on as they leave this panel discussion today?
Well, the one thing is that we're presently living in the time of the biggest, like the largest ever organized attack on transgender people we've ever seen. Like we've been talking about the legislation, we've been talking about the murders. Like there's a organized, conscious attack on transgender people going on right now, and the second thing is that we need people, we need everybody, whether you're cis, trans, whatever, we need you in the struggle fighting against this. And that's what I want people to take away, is that they should in the struggle. They should fight back and fight for oppressed people.
I agree. There's you said it's 1% of the population is trans, a couple million, 1.5 million, I think. If we have the gay community, if we have the support from allies, if we have the support from cis allies, if we have the support from all trans people, all queer people, if we all just, we just fight, we'll get there eventually. It's not all bad. It's an uphill battle, but we'll get there.
And I agree with that. I believe a better world is possible. I guess it's my revolutionary optimism. And to my BIPOC sisters out there, revolutionary optimism. We are not alone. We don't need to fight alone. We need greater solidarity, but understand that through our solidarity is a victory. To the rest of my rainbow family, I say unto you, LGB, don't forget the T. Say our names. But more importantly, let's fight together. And we have a fight to fight. It's called the Equality Act.
Yeah.
And yes, I know a certain person named Mitch is holding that up. But together, we can walk over Mr. McConnell. We can walk over the Republican fascists that are holding it up. And we can push that bill up into Joe Biden's face and say, sign this now.
Sign this.
We have the power. But we're not going to get that power if we allow people like the ADF to try and tear us apart. There is no... And also want to send a note to all my black folks. There's no black liberation without LGBTQ. Remember that. And to all of us.
We got to start somewhere.
Yes. And to all of us, cis, straight, trans, gay, lesbian, all of us. If you don't want to get knocked on your ass, come fight for the working class. Right now, working people are striking back across this country. It is time for us to come together and fight for the things we really want, and more importantly, fight for the things we really need as one community and one people. We've done it before.
Healthcare.
We can do healthcare, especially.
Jobs.
Especially in the middle of the biggest
Housing.
Public health crisis in 80 years. Housing. That 32% stat that I quoted earlier, that's right here in our home. That's in our home. And it's time for us to all together to start defending our home. I say often that panels like this are not just about information. They're about self-defense of our rainbow family. This is community self-defense. And Jamie, it's Jessica. It's always good to be at the barricades with you. And let us continue to be as such.